Both Al and Sergio have given us a great start to our conference with some ideas and approaches to how to advance community engaged research. So who has the first question for them? All right. Yes. Yeah, will you step to microphone here? And if you need the microphone and can't get to it, hold your hand up, we'll bring it to you.
Good
and
morning.
Tell us who you are.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Try again.
Hello?
Hey, I think it's adjusting. One more time. It's on. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Tracy Quijada. I'm with the California Department of Public Health in California. Also, I'm also the co-chair of the San Diego County Promotores Coalition from San Diego.
Right.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. My question is for Dr. Sergio Aquilar-Gaxiola about the Mental Health Service Act. How did that come to be? How can we start working on that on other initiatives?
Yes. Well, it passed, roughly with, I think that 52 or 53% of the votes. But what is interesting is that the millionaires, the ones who are contributing to this fund, they continue to be strong supporters, over 70%. What helped with this, going back to your question, is that there were incredible champions and visionaries that made this possible. The main architect behind this is the senator, the Speaker of the Senate, who is now the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, and he's the one who crusaded. Truly was a champion, continues to be a champion for mental health. And but there are others as well, that jump into the bandwagon. And now, it is very solid.
So we need a champion to get started, connecting to elected officials.
Right.
Other questions? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Regina Greer-Smith. I'm from California and Chicago. Very glad to be here. I first want to say hello, Dr. Sergio. It's great to see you again, and it's good to see the advancement of your work. And I wanted to make a comment on Al Richmond's speech this morning.
Richmond.
Okay.
No.
I want to say that that was an extremely powerful, impactful presentation. I think that you presented in front of the UN and the International Court of Justice. That is extremely impactful. It brought me back. I'm a child of the civil rights parents, and I think that is in my DNA. And to listen to the journey you sent us through is something that we all need to continuously revisit and be mindful, especially in the current situation and to where we came from. So, Al, I want to thank you very much for that, bringing it back home and to bring it into what we're our mission and ministry today here at this forum. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mishman.
Lloyd Mitchell from Duke and a few other places. It's really great to see this group, and I really want to thank Al and Sergio for their inspiring comments. But I want to add a few, and actually, yes, I sometimes am be a little edgy. A lot of the work that some of us do is in Republican states, and it's with places that are dealing with their own conflict, controversies, and difficulties. And as Al pointed out powerfully, language matters. So I'd like to share as a discussion that's been going on with some of the states, especially the Republican governors, about how to have a useful dialogue to move forward in health for all. And it involves the use of changing the terms. And this will be carried out by the CDC and by the state health officers. They've agreed to do that. One is to use the term optimal health for all. because it engaged Republicans and Democrats, old and young, and something we can all agree on. Measuring that turns out to be a key issue in which there's not a lot of agreement, and a role for, I think, the CTSAs. The one is language about optimal health for all. The other is actually no longer talking about social determinants, and this is to Al's point, but structural determinants, because it's not just about social. It's about housing, it's about safety, it's about the environment at large. So using the term structural determinants is a decision the CDC has made to start using in their language. And they're particularly focusing on health disparities and measuring the differences within subgroups is something the CDC will do as assessing the impact of its work. And the last is something that Sergio said, and I'd like to say it another way and more strongly, and that is that increasingly we're seeing the action is at the state level. And one of the strengths I think this group has is that we represent most of the states, and that there's a real opportunity, I think, for us as we look at stakeholder engagement to think of the policymakers as one of our stakeholders. And in some places represented here, that actually is well underway. And the opportunity to engage around optimal health, the measurement and the finding of strategies that allow us to be precise and targeted with our use of limited resources is something I think Republicans, Democrats, old and young, can engage in productively, and I hope will be part of our mission as well.
Thanks, Lloyd. I don't know that I heard a specific question, but I'm going to add a question to it, Lloyd. In taking some chair privileges, I really do like the idea of shifting from social determinants to structural determinants, in part because I think sometimes when people hear the word social, they presume that it's also linked to behavior and choices that people make, and sort of takes away the responsibility of others to act in removing some structural inequalities. But as far as optimal health, I personally worry that by using optimal health for all, minority groups, no matter what your minority status or affiliation might be, get lost in with everyone else. So I don't know, Al, if you or Sergio want to respond specifically to what you think about the terminology you're moving, and certainly I recognize it's important to be able to have conversations in spaces where people have different ideas. But any thoughts on the terminology?
Yeah, so I think words are very important. So one of the things that we were intentional about is that as an organization, our work this summer and the work moving forward will focus on structural inequality, not EDI or equity, diversity, and inclusion. There are lots of people in the space of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think that work is important, but really it's, to me, fundamental to this issue is that of structural inequalities. And that when you do not address the structural inequalities, be it systems or institutions, then you're really kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it. It's really, what I hear a lot of people saying basically is that I do not want to attend another kumbaya type experience where we make people feel good and all of that. So I think that for us, it's really understanding the root causes. How did we get here? And really having the courage to ask really, really tough questions. These are not easy questions. But I do think that, for example, across the country, we're seeing college students and faculty at universities asking questions about what is the history of our university? How did our university come to be? A lot of colleges are exploring who were the founders of this campus? Did they contribute money from their enslavement of people to this institution? What were the initial policies and practices that this university had? I was at Yale a while back, and one of the points I made at Yale was the fact that, until I really got on the campus and started reading some of the stuff, I really forgot that Yale was a school for men. It was not a school for women. So when you think about structural inequality, that university was not built for women. And some of you are saying many others, right? A whole lot of them, right? And so unless you understand that, when you think about integrating women's studies and women faculty and all of that into that university, you have to go back to the genesis of it. That's the thing I really keep pushing, is that you have to unpack this and say, how did we get here, and why are we seeing these differences on our college campuses and in our communities?
So we're only have time for a few more questions, and I got people at the microphone, if that's okay. So I'll go here, and then we'll try to get to you, Don.
Jonice Thompson from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I direct the community engagement for the Minority Health and Health Disparities Center. I enjoyed both presentations, but I wanted to ask Mr. Richmond, you talked a lot about partnerships and how important they are. And I went and looked at your third strategic bullet, your goals in terms of those partnerships. Can you talk a little bit more about that empowering, that level playing ground, and making sure those partnerships are fair and equitable? What do you have in place, or where you're headed in that direction? Because oftentimes, I've been at the university over 25 years, and I will be retiring very soon. And it's increasingly, I see that there is a need to empower community partners, and just as much as the researcher needs to learn the language of the community needs to learn the language of the researcher. And if it doesn't happen, then when they come to the table together, they're both at a disadvantage. So with the CCPH, what are you doing to heavily focus on that area? Because I don't think that, unapologetically, I don't think that we're going to see change if we don't empower equally on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely so. Thank you. So, I mean, I love that first presentation around balance, right? I think that's amazing. And so in a smaller group this morning, we talked about issues around compensating community-based organizations and community leaders for their time and engagement in this work, right? And so it's not just saying to people, here's an invitation, come to this meeting, but it's also recognizing that people have needs, right? And so they're doing this work because they're committed to their community, but they certainly need to be compensated. So I think that what we have to do is look for spaces where there is perceptions or realities of inequity, and then really understand how we put resources to bear, bring resources to bear to address those inequities, and creating a level playing field. I think that's what we do, and we do really well. So I think that within the community engagement cause, there's a big push towards making sure that there are many grants that are given to community leaders, that communities share in the creation of manuscripts and other products and materials as well. So we have to look at where there's an inequity, and then how do we work in collaboration to address those inequities.
Don, if you can go quickly.
Thanks. Just an amazing opening. Thanks to both you, Al and Sergio, for your comments. There's so much I could say, Al, about your just courage in addressing this issue. And I just also want to just call out your emphasis on transformational experiences. So very important in our work. Sergio, a question for you. You raised this concept of community evidence.
Right.
And I'd like to hear more about that. That sounds really interesting.
Yes, this concept originated in work that SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, did, 10 years ago. They created a national collaborative that specifically on community-defined evidence. And there is a definition that they came up with, and that basically is related to, when community members who don't access the public health services because of whatever reason, distress, for example, that they go to where they feel trust. And several community members coincide that they trust that there are certain programs and practices that are being helpful to them. But the CBOs, these are basically rooted in CBOs who are located where people live. You know, the people look like the people that they are serving, and in the case of share the same culture, sometimes the same language. So it is almost by consensus when you start asking various people, when you are facing, for example, these problems or these challenges, what do you do? Where do you go? Okay? And when people, several of them say, oh, I go to el programa bienvenido or whatever, then you have something going. And this investment, the 60 million, is to really focus on that, to see is there something there that goes beyond the public health services that people trust and that are needing more of an evaluation, to raise the level of evidence as we understand it.
Thank you. Leslie?
As brief as I can. I am Crystal Evans, and I am the Director of Community Engagement and Research Partnerships Formation at the Johns Hopkins Institute of Clinical and Translational Research. And one of the projects that we do is managing a program to honor and educate young people about Henrietta Lacks and her legacy, and to promote their involvement in STEM. And through this year, we really dedicated, myself and several of our community partners who are out in the audience today, educators, an effort to create a more structured and real curriculum around this program. And we have encountered some challenges and some pushback within our own institution as we try to get the message and some of the information that Mr. Richmond addressed to the younger people who are really grappling with some of these ideas for the first time. And so my question is really, how do you start having those frank conversations, even within your institution, with individuals who are often in very senior levels? There's a need to continue and formalize and make these educational programs about community engagement of a greater benefit to the people that we serve. How do you even start that talk without offending people?
So as I was listening to Sergio, and you had that amazing slide about the diversity in California, I think about the diversity all over this country. And so my mind, tried to connect what you were saying, Sergio, with what I was talking about. And I feel like if we don't get this right around racism in this country, that we're really in trouble. We're in trouble because we are a growing, diverse nation. We simply have to recognize that. We see states where minority birth rates are higher, cities where that's occurring in the Midwest, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, right, all across this country. We simply have to get this right. But we have to wrestle with, and it's not easy, our own history, our academic histories. I mean, we think about Henrietta Lacks and the legacy of that at Johns Hopkins of all places, right? So I think that, how ironic, right, is that. So I think that one of the things that, for example, PCORI, I see friends here from PCORI, is that at one point, I think last year, when they did a trustworthiness meeting, they had her grandson or one of her family members actually present to talk about the family's, reaction to this and the legacy as a family around this. So I think that we have to wrestle with these issues. They're not easy, right? But communities and campuses together through partnerships have to struggle through these issues. If not, really, we just become kind of community. We have campuses that are just totally isolated from their communities. And really, that's not going to be good when you think about East Baltimore, right? And when you think about the demographics of East Baltimore, right? And the changing gentrification in downtown Baltimore, but also occurring in other cities. So I think this idea of transformation is really looking at how can we work in partnership together to create transformative experiences. One of the things about college campuses is that they have so many resources, right? And so we've done a great job around service learning, but how do we bring those same resources, students, college, facilities, and all of those things to bear, opening up the doors of college campuses so that people that live in those surrounding communities feel welcome to just walk on that community, to be on that community campus, and to take advantage of the resources that are there. I think we have to just drill deeper and think in a different way. And I think that the answers really rest in the community. I think the communities could tell us more about what they need and the partnerships that they want from the communities, but we have to have a listening ear and be sensitive to that.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
Ms. Chen, Ms. Carter, you guys took down those notes, right?
Yeah.
And when I talk later on, we're going to have a little powwow with Mr. Richmond. So we're going to make this happen. Thank you.
But we have to, I would just say, Consuelo, that colleges and universities have to recognize that they are residents in a community, right? Oftentimes, they're the largest employer, right? So they're residents in the community. And so I want to change this paradigm where we have people just kind of like driving in from the suburbs to a central city campus and then driving back out. And then there are riots, and then there's unrest in our communities, and we're like, how did that happen? Where did that come from, right? Which is totally anemic to what's occurring around us. And we have to do more than just have one person on the campus, oftentimes a minority, who leads community relations. That's not the answer.
So I hate to have to end the discussion, so don't throw things at me. But I want to make sure we get through the rest of the fantastic agenda we have.